I'm just gonna come out and say it, Stalker 2 is one of my favorite games of 2024. And in this video, I will be giving you some of the reasons as to why that is, in a sort of one-to-one discussion between you and me. That said, this video is going to be fairly unscripted, and as such it might come off as a little chaotic, but if you're a channel regular, that's probably why you're here in the first place. So first off, let's go through some of the good things about Stalker 2. The game looks really good on a top-tier PC setup. Now I'm running it on an RTX 4090 with an AMD 7950 X3D, coupled with 64 gigs of RAM and a high-speed SSD. Meaning that the game loads relatively quickly, and I've been able to run the game at a mostly smooth 100 FPS or more with frame regeneration turned on. There has been some stutters every now and then, but I'm expecting this to be fixed in future patches. But besides that, there's nothing massive in terms of performance. Alright, now to the gameplay itself, I think the exploration is just absolutely amazing. Partly why the exploration feels so amazing is because of how dangerous the world is. I can't really count how many times I've found some pretty cool things around the world. There's so much detail crammed into the zone, and it feels like most of the things that you find throughout the game have all been organically placed by someone. It doesn't feel like it's been generated by a computer, either algorithmically or procedurally. It just feels like there's a real intent behind everything you find in the game, and that makes the game world feel so much more immersive, at least to me. And then we have the gunplay, which just feels extremely smooth. I've been a big FPS head ever since I was a teenager, and so how guns feel and act in video games is really important to me in terms of immersion. And I think they've done a pretty good job here at making the guns just really satisfying to use. All the sounds that they've added to the mechanics of the guns, the recoil, the fact that your gun can jam is also something that I've never seen before in a video game. Now, obviously, I haven't played a Stalker game before, so have some patience with me here. Maybe that's a feature in the first Stalker games, but it's a first for me in Stalker 2. So it's like, whoa, your gun can actually jam mid-fight? That actually adds a degree of complexity to firefights, because you can't always trust that your gun will hold up when you're fighting, which makes firefights much more engaging and interesting, because all of a sudden you have to find cover or change positions, and it's just super engaging when stuff like this happens. Now, I don't particularly like when the gun jams all the time, but you know, it's still a very interesting detail added to the game, and I like it a lot. Speaking of the gunplay, there's also a certain strategy you have to use when you're fighting various enemies. So you have like the regular ammo for human enemies, because you can just headshot them, even on veteran difficulty, and most human enemies will die. And then you switch over to some more heavy-hitting rounds that actually damages your gun whenever you're fighting stuff like mutants and things like that, because they obviously have thicker skin, so you need to use more deadlier ammo for those enemy types, which is another degree of complexity that I really like. Another really cool detail that I absolutely love is the blowouts or the emissions. You know, these big storms that almost turns the zone into a complete hellscape, and the sky turns red and there's lighting everywhere. You can suddenly die at a moment's notice just by getting hit, but the zone just becomes so much more dangerous. It makes the game world feel even more alive when you're running around exploring, because all of a sudden there's a storm rolling in and you have to take cover and you have to wait it out, which just does wonders for immersion. I also like the fact that the game doesn't really hold your hand, and that is something that I've started to appreciate more and more the older I've gotten, is the fact that I want to learn by playing. I don't want to learn by getting told what to do. And there are definitely some pointers that Stalker 2 gives you as you're starting the game, but generally it just pushes you in a direction and then you're free to explore. And it's sort of like this same situation with Elden Ring and FromSoft games, is that it gives you this visceral feeling of being in the game world. You're getting lost in it because it just lets you do whatever you want to do. Like, you don't have to continue with the main story if you don't want to after the intro missions in Stalker 2. You can just do whatever you want. You can just live your life as a stalker and just get better and better at the game and becoming like a true stalker that's able to brave all kinds of challenges in the zone. It really takes you into the game. Now, some things that do take you out of the game, unfortunately, are some of the bugs or anomalies, as some of you Stalker fans would call it. But before that, we gotta talk about one thing that I am annoyed by a lot when I play the game, and that is the carry weight system. Now, on one hand, it is kind of immersive, knowing that you can't just pick up everything that's lying around, and you can't just haul ass back to camp, having like a huge backpack filled with 69 guns or something like that. On the other hand, since it's a video game, and since there aren't a lot of friendly stalkers out in the wild, you have to go back to your camp or back to base to sell off items that you find. And money is very important in Stalker 2 if you want to buy better guns and better equipment. Now, yes, you can find most of these things out in the world by looting stashes and such, so you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money, but at least at the start of the game, it's a good thing to farm up some equipment to buy better equipment later on. And my sanity actually started getting strained after a while when I had to pick up a bunch of loot and then sell it off. But during that return trip to camp, I was heavily weighed down, and so I could barely run. So it took way too much time to get back to base just to sell off guns and items that I just wanted to get rid of so I could make more money. So a fix for this would be that they increase the carry weight a little bit. I do think that you could fit at least 2 guns more in the backpack before it starts weighing you down too much. Then again, there are artifacts out in the game world that you can find that actually increase your carry weight, but I think that it could help some newer players get more familiar with the game world if you just increase the carry weight at least a little bit, because you at least have to get halfway through the game to find these things, or at least you will have to play for a fair bit, or you have to look up a guide, which is a little immersion breaking, and I would recommend that you don't, because it's just much more fun to find everything on your own. But I think increasing the carry weight would be a small positive. Now, one tip from me personally here is to only bring one rifle, and generally it's a good idea to start off with just carrying a shotgun, because you can use your pistol to kill most human enemies with a headshot, so you don't necessarily need to bring a rifle for the mutants you encounter in the world. I think it's probably a better idea to just bring a shotgun to deal with the mutants, because they go down relatively quickly when you're using a shotgun. So if you want to be able to carry more stuff so you can sell, just bring one rifle, because movement is very important, and it's going to save you so much time being able to sprint across the map, because the game really slows down way too much when you have too much stuff in your backpack. Another aspect of the game design I don't like very much is the fact that bloodsuckers, you know, the Cthulhu faces, the squid faces, they're way too common. There's way too many of them. I don't know how many of them I've killed at this point, but the fact that they're supposed to be rare in the zone kind of takes you out of the experience a little bit when you keep running into them. And the thing is, they were pretty scary at the start of the game because they disappear all of a sudden and they can run around you really quickly and kill you pretty quickly as well. But the thing is, they've become more of a nuisance now. They're just annoying and they just push you over and you fall into the mud and you have to get up again. And generally, I never really die whenever I encounter the bloodsuckers, but I do think that they're just kind of annoying to fight. At this point, I would prefer fighting other mutants, but most other mutants barely show up. It's almost always bloodsuckers. So I'd prefer if they balanced the enemy spawn of these things, because they're just annoying at this point. All right, so getting past the game design flaws, I guess, yes, there is a lot of bugs, which is interesting because at the beginning of the game, when I started playing it the other day, and you can see my first impressions in that video that's popping up on the screen right here, I barely ran into any bugs at all. The only thing that I complained about was the stuttering at times. Now, I've ran into a couple ones after that. There is a tendency for NPCs to sink into the ground, and for some reason, my shadow has a tendency to lose its head, which is also kind of immersion breaking. And the shadow moves in such a weird way sometimes, and it seems like there's some problem with how the model works outside of first person. And it's very reminiscent of the issues that Cyberpunk 2077 ran into, where your shadow is just really wonky and looks really odd, specifically because the game is designed around being a first-person game. Now, the most irritating thing, I think, about Stalker 2 is the fact that lighting doesn't really work as intended. I would think, because a lot of the light sources just don't give off enough light to light up a room, for example. Supposedly, this is because of Lumen, which is the lighting system that Unreal Engine 5 uses. And it seems like it's not been properly implemented, because the game can get really, like, too dark at times, way too dark. At some points throughout the game, I've barely been able to see anything at all, especially when there's enemies around and you're having a hard time locating them. Speaking of that, we also have the enemy line of sight. For some reason, they have a tendency to be able to see you through dense bushes and marshes. Not only that, but they can also see you sometimes through walls, which murders the whole stealth aspect of being a stalker. So unfortunately, that doesn't always work like you might have wanted it to. A lot of the times it does, however, and I've been able to skulk about and silently take down my enemies, but it's a pretty reoccurring theme where enemies are still being able to see you through walls, and that is definitely a big fix they need to introduce as soon as possible. Also, human enemies seem to have activated some form of aimbot because they can laser you down so quickly. So that said, I do think it would be a good thing for the game if the devs could change some of the enemy AI so that they whiff sometimes and they miss you sometimes, because as of speaking right now, they can literally spot you from a mile away, it seems, and kill you super rapidly. And don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with difficult enemies. I'm loving that this game is kicking my ass, but sometimes it's kicking my ass way too hard, in a way that I find unrealistic. But I guess that also kind of describes Stalker 2 really well. It has a pretty steep learning curve, and it requires you to spend time in the zone to get to know your enemies and how to move about the world. It requires you to be engaged at all times because one misstep can mean the end of you. Hell, even the easiest difficulty will most likely make a lot of gamers frustrated because the game will sorely kick your ass if you're not careful. But that's also kind of what I love about this game. I love a good challenge. I love complex systems, and I love a complex game world that doesn't hold my hand. Just like FromSoft games has a steep learning curve, just like Baldur's Gate 3 turned me into a fan of turn-based combat, this game has slowly but surely grinded out my rookie mistakes, and so the zone has turned me into a hardened stalker. And at the end of the day, Stalker 2 is not a perfect game. Don't get it twisted, that's not what I'm saying here. It's not even really finished, and it definitely needed some more time to cook, to iron out bugs and such. And I don't think some of the systems are properly implemented into the game, such as the lighting system, and the carry weight, and how enemies are a little bit too aimbody. But here's the thing, a boring game with no rough edges, with everything smoothed out, running perfectly with perfect performance, is still a boring game. However, a buggy yet really fun game can eventually become great. And I believe that is the case with Stalker 2. Again, it's not perfect. Hell, it can be hilariously stupid at times, but I've had a wonderful time with it. And the last time I got this completely lost inside of a game was with Baldur's Gate 3. And that's why I think Stalker 2 is one of the best games of 2024, because this game has completely enraptured me. Now, I'm not ready to give it my personal Game of the Year award just yet, as we still have some other titles to go through before the end of the year, such as Path of Exile 2 and Infinity Nikki. No, that is not a joke. I will be playing that game, and you're gonna watch me. Now, you guys obviously have your own thoughts about Stalker 2, whether they're positive or negative, so leave those thoughts in the comments below. Also, thank you to the wonderful Nsven squad for supporting the channel. And just so you know, if you enjoyed the video and if you do enjoy my takes on gaming, you can become a supporter as well by clicking that button right there. As I've said before, becoming a member might seem like a small thing for you, but it matters a lot to me and it allows me to run this channel full time. But that's about it. This has been Mr. Holton, signing out.